Hello and welcome to Monday's Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the first of a week of budget specials. So everything you need to know about the biggest moment of the government to date and everything else in under 20 minutes. And the clock's going back yesterday means it's light again when we're recording this, thank goodness.
All hail the Scottish farmers, Sam. I've never been so pleased to see the clock going back after all these years. Now we middle-aged people can be enjoying this moment instead of moaning like all the young people do. We're counting down to Wednesday for the budget, and Sam, I feel like we already know everything that's in it. Why?
Well, should we come on to that in the moment when we talk about the budget? Let's just whiz through the week ahead. Today, Keir Starmer is in the West Midlands, which is also where I'm heading immediately after this recording, where he's telling the public that everyone has to face reality in this budget. So that presumably includes him. Number 10, no doubt, confirming the appointment of Political Director Claire Reynolds. Interestingly, she's a former Blair and Brown link person with MEPs, chair of the Labour Women's Network, and is married to the business secretary, Johnny Reynolds. The Foreign Office have got an announcement at 11 a.m. I think it's about sanctions and the police misconduct hearing into what happened with Sarah Everard is going to begin. Is actually something that's going to feature quite a lot this week in government as well.
Tomorrow is the day before the budget. It's billed as Health Day in Downing Street, so presumably we'll see a fair bit of Wes Streeting. The Health Secretary, there's something coming from DEFRA, we think, on import checks, Sam. Usually that means they're going to be delayed, although we don't actually know this time. And there's a speech by Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary. She's talking about our favourite subject in all the world, journalism.
Wednesday is the budget. That'll be at 12:30 after Prime Minister's questions at 12. The usual Office for Budget Responsibility press conference, or biased Office for Budget Responsibility, if you're a Tory at the moment, is in the afternoon. You'll be watching Sky all day. Everything else gets drowned out politically on Budget Day, which is worth, if you're having any attention left, there's a legal aid statement from the Ministry of Justice on Wednesday. Just keep an eye on that. Just see if it's linked to the budget and those cuts.
Yeah, and normally the Wednesday PMQ session before the budget is immediately forgotten and not noteworthy. But this one, Sam, of course, will be Rishi Sunak's last ever PMQ session, or we assume his last ever PMQ session, before he steps down as Tory leader at the weekend. So that might be a bit of fun. Thursday, the morning after the budget, of course, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves will be out and about doing interviews and all the rest of it. We get all the big economic think tanks doing their verdicts on the budget, the Resolution Foundation, the IFS, and so on. It's Halloween, and so we apologise in advance for the tortuous metaphors that I will certainly be deploying that day, and no doubt most of the lobby. And there's some interesting stats coming too, Sam. Stuff on GPs, also stuff from the MOJ, the quarterly stats on the state of prisons. Always grim reading, but always really important to listen to as well.
Also, I think that there will be a transparency release from the Cabinet Office at the point at which everyone's most knackered, which is 4 o'clock on Thursday.
Ooh, they're fun.
It's things like special advisors, pay. It's the kind of stuff that the government has to do, meetings with stakeholders, or people that some ministers would rather not be seen with. And it's interesting, if it's coming then, it means that they don't really want us to spend a lot of time looking at it, but they often don't get their way. Friday, very little, just Darren Jones, Chief Secretary of the Treasury, having another sort of batting out on the budget, and he'll be trying to mop up any controversy that's still seeping into Friday morning.
And then Saturday's the big one. We forget all about the budget, which barely matters, and the only thing anyone really cares about, which is the result of the Tory leadership contest, will be announced on Saturday. Either Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick will be installed as party leader that day.
Now, there is a huge amount going on globally that we're frankly not going to get into, whether it's Israel's retaliation on Iran, the extraordinary Donald Trump rally in Madison Square overnight. And of course, there are UK implications, but we'll stick to the budget, apart from one small piece of politics. This caught my eye. There was an excellent long read in the Sunday Times yesterday by Caroline Wiener and Tim Shipman about the budget. But in the penultimate paragraph, there was this extraordinary drive-by shooting of David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. And they blamed the fact that Keir Starmer did end up, against his will, having to discuss reparations for slavery on that extraordinary trip to Samoa last week for the Commonwealth heads of government after the machine failed to quash an official call for damages. And they say, in a brutal sentence, the latter was blamed on David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary who repeatedly backed the demands by Caribbean nations before taking up his post, and is seen as vulnerable in a reshuffle expected in the new year. So we've got a new Foreign Secretary who is vulnerable in his position, according to the Sunday Times. I mention this only because I've been picking up something not that dissimilar, but from a different point of view. I've heard from more than one person that actually Team Lammy have started to get quite worried since the departure of Sue Gray about quite whether he's in as secure a position as possible. The switch from Sue, who was a fan of his and supporter of his, to Morgan McSweeney as Chief of Staff, has removed a big ally in number 10. Another ally of Sue Gray, who was doing foreign affairs, also left at the same time. And they're going round talking about this, and it's clearly occupying their headspace at this critical time in global affairs. And it's just quite interesting that appears to be a distraction for some of the people around the Foreign Secretary at this critical juncture.
There are certain people in the cabinet who are, would I suggest, almost like a hangover from a previous iteration of Keir Starmer, the more lefty end of the cabinet, and Louise Hay would be another one, who are already, and David Lammy definitely being one of those as well, who are already being talked about as being shuffled out in the new year. I would think as well, David Lammy's past comments about Donald Trump don't exactly help his case. If Donald Trump wins the election in 8 days' time, do you actually want a foreign secretary there dealing with that camp who's got all of the past comments on his record that David Lammy has made? I would imagine Lammy is very much rooting for Kamala Harris, because I would think that will help his cause a bit. But we shall see. That election, of course, is absolutely neck and neck. And we'll be talking more and more about it, probably not until next week, because the budget is absolutely dominating things in the UK, and it's got to deserve most of our attention. We're posing the question about why we already know so much of the budget already 3 days out. I mean, we talked a little bit about this last week, Sam. It feels like there's just been a real shift. That the whole thing that we used to have about trying to keep budgets secret right up until the moment that the Chancellor stands up, that was an absolutely crucial part of British politics, I guess, for fear of moving the markets ahead of time. That whole dynamic has shifted on its head now, and Chancellors are now desperately trying not to move the markets by leaking out all the crucial information beforehand. And we actually had Rachel Reeves in Washington last week telling people she's going to do this big move on debt and borrowing ahead of time to allow the markets a chance to adjust, so you don't get the possibility or the risk of some Liz Truss style crash at the day or in the days after the budget. And that's what she's been trying to do. And I guess that fundamentally, Sam, is the main reason why all of this has come out already. I
think it's one of the big reasons. I think there are two points here about why we know so much in the budget and why there's absolutely nothing left. I'd say straight up, I am being told, because there was lots of discussions on the Sunday shows, there is not going to be a rabbit in this budget. We are in the post-rabbit era, somebody involved in budget preparation said. So, yes, there are going to be some things that we don't know, but nothing big. Why has this happened? Well, as you say, partly to do with the markets, and they have notched up a little bit, but they're actually, if you look at the 10-year gilt cost, a good measure of government debt, cost of government debt, actually it's been higher 2 or 3 times already this year, so it's going to have to climb quite a bit higher before alarm bells properly start ringing. But the other thing that they want to do is prepare politically, because I can tell you, Jack, there are nervous Labour MPs out there, whatever the government says about what it said in the manifesto being completely consistent with raising employer national insurance, they are worried about the perception of breaking manifesto promises. I was talking to a Labour MP last week who still thinks that they're on a sticky wicket on this, even though the Treasury is confident that it's found an argument to use, and are worried simply about whether or not there is too much difficult news in this budget, not trumped by enough good news. And so political pitch rolling so that Labour MPs are privately happy. They, of course, will be publicly, inevitably cheering. But as this budget is unpicked in the weeks to come, rather than just the hours after the budget. So I think that is why the argument that they want to have, and this is the argument that Keir Starmer is going to be having in the West Midlands today, when he gives a speech mid-morning, is to pose this budget as a series of choices, political choices, where they hope they can frame the Conservatives as being on the other side. So investment will decline, with Labour in favour of investment, albeit having to change the rules to do that. Tax rises or austerity. So that's justifying the need to put up taxes about 35 billion or so. And honesty or fiscal fiction, that's their justification, sort of the need for honesty for there being very, very tight spending decisions in the various departments. So they're trying to make political choice arguments around the three biggest, most difficult bits of the budget, and sort of embed the word choice in the speech.
And of course, Keir Starmer trying to make this argument at Westminster today. His feet have barely touched the ground since he got back from that 20-odd hour flight from Samoa. You got a feel for the guy. I think I'd have taken the day off today and stayed in bed, but no, not an option for the Prime Minister. In terms of the reassuring the markets that the big move Rachel Reeves is going to make on borrowing on Wednesday, ours had very much the same briefing that the Sunday Times reported on Sunday. I was talking to someone in the city who says that she's not out of the woods yet. You know, the fact that gilts haven't gone through the roof following her announcement Wednesday that she's going to do this doesn't mean that it's safe, and their opinion was very much that although this is apparently going to free up the possibility of £50 billion of investment in infrastructure and other capital projects, she hasn't actually got the headway and the headroom to actually spend that much money, and it's far more likely that she'll spend something like half that, or perhaps even less than half that, on Wednesday for fear of spooking the markets, and that people are going to be watching very, very closely precisely how much of that money really does get pledged to different projects on Wednesday, and how much of it is sort of left for a quote-unquote rainy day, because there are definitely fears in the city that this could still go wrong, even though this has been telegraphed very clearly in advance. This is a big move on borrowing. We don't see things like this happen very often, and Rachel Reeves is going to have to be careful that the outcome is what she wants it to be, and we don't get into a vaguely trussy world by the end of the week.
It's important to say that the hope in the Treasury is that there will never have to be another budget in this Parliament where they come back and ask for more tax on the scale that they're going to on Wednesday. But what that means is that really this pot that she's creating, the 50 billion pot, although she won't spend all of it, it's all she's got for the whole Parliament, potentially. Because where else is money going to come from? Well, growth. Well, there was a meeting in Downing Street, I think last Wednesday, I think it was London MPs, and London MP after London MP put their hand up and said, well, we're worried that the kind of the proceeds of growth, the tax revenue that will flow from all these investment projects that you're going to promise next Wednesday won't come in time for this Parliament. So this is all she's got. And if this budget doesn't land, the pressure will be on the government to spend more. So yes, we will look at the 10-year gilt cost this week, but we'll also be looking at it in January and in April next year, and on and on and on. Just a quick word on what there is left to say in this budget, what we don't know yet. As you were mentioning, tomorrow it sounds like Wes Streeting's out and about. Expect a big, maybe £10 billion announcement about the NHS. So that will be a big centrepiece. The other thing the other sort of dog that hasn't barked yet is that, of course, Keir Starmer earlier this year set out his first steps. And quite a lot of them haven't been funded, but they're first steps on his missions, and they've got to be funded. And I suspect that's a large part of the good news of this budget. So if you turn to the first steps on the Labour website and look at those that require money, so it's the 40,000 more appointments in the health service each week, which will probably be covered by the 10 billion. Hundreds of new specialist investigators for border security command, so some Home Office money. More neighbourhood police for antisocial behaviour and youth hubs. 6,500 new teachers in key subjects. Now, it's those. I think the biggest first step that needs to be fulfilled is that one, the new teachers in key subjects one. We've heard nothing about it so far. Two other things that I'm watching for. I'm not sure that a fuel duty rise is imminent. I just get different responses from people on that subject to everything else. And I can see in the Times, they don't think that that's going up. And I also think with the American election a week away, they have to have a story about how they're going to get to 2.5% of GDP on defence. Keir Starmer said he was going to fulfil it. You will know from the budget numbers whether it's possible. So I can't see how they don't say whether or not they're going to meet it and when they're going to meet it on Wednesday. They may try not to, and I haven't had any briefing or any suggestion that they will, but you will know implied from the public spending numbers in future whether it's a possibility. So those are the things I think that are left to talk about in the budget.
The one that caught my eye, Sam, over the weekend is this idea that they're going to abandon the £2 cap on bus fares. This, to me, set my radar flashing immediately. This looks like classic Treasury brain error in the sense that this is a extremely popular, very retail policy that is enjoyed by lots and lots and lots of, shall we call them, working people around the country. And the briefing to the Sunday Times that reported this says the DFT, the Department of Transport, is going to publish some analysis this week, which says the £2 limit on bus fares is not financially sustainable for taxpayers and bus operators, having cost £200 million in its first 10 months alone. Well, that's only not financially sustainable if you don't want to spend a few £100 million a year capping bus fares, which it seems the Treasury won't. And they're going to publish one of these Treasury assessments which looks at, for every pound spent to support the cap, it only gets 71 to 90p of economic benefits. This is exactly the sort of Treasury stuff that we were supposed to be moving away from in terms of investing in regional areas and rural areas where bus fares can be extraordinarily expensive if nobody caps them. And anyone who's lived in a rural area on low income, and I remember doing it myself, knows that bus fares just go completely through the roof. And yeah, they don't bring, capping it like this doesn't bring massive financial benefits for the country, but it does make lots and lots of people who live in those areas feel very grateful, and getting rid of it for the sake of a few £100 a year, I suspect, is going to kick off. The regional mayors are going to kick off about it. Lots and lots and lots of local councils are going to kick off about it, and it's something that lots and lots of people all around the country will feel immediately. And I think, lots of Labour MPs are going to be very unhappy about that if Rachel Reeves goes ahead with it.
The amount additional that you pay, you could end up currently paying £2 for a bus journey. Those bus journeys could go up to £14, somebody in local government was telling me. But even worse, from the government's point of view, the massive regional disparity. This won't happen in London, so London is protected. I don't think it'll happen in Manchester either, because Andy Burnham's citywide Manchester Yellow Bus Scheme is funded out of a different pot, but it will happen further afield. So the regional disparities, I think, are going to be very tricky on that. Shall we do 2 minutes not on the Tories, but on Mike Amesbury, Jack, just because that story seems to be on a lot of the front pages?
I think we should, and we better have. This, of course, is the Runcorn MP who was involved in some sort of altercation over the weekend at like 2 o'clock in the morning on the streets of his constituency, where videos have now been published showing him, well, they appear to show him essentially brawling with a member of the public. He has been suspended by the Labour Party. The police are investigating. He says, put out a statement saying he's helping the police with inquiries, saying he felt threatened in the incident. Obviously, this is going to be a video that lots and lots of people in the country watch, Sam, and it's just classic for Labour. They're desperately trying to get the conversation about what they want to talk about, framing the budget in the way that they want to. But Keir Starmer going off to the West Midlands after no sleep from going to Samoa, trying to frame the day, and instead, all anyone's going to want to talk about, the only message that's going to get through to people actually out there in the country, is not going to be Keir Starmer's speech in the West Midlands. It's going to be the video of an MP fighting on the street, and that's not great for Labour. Also begs the question, Sam, obviously raises the possibility of a by-election, which is probably the last thing Labour wants, given it's been tanking in the polls over the last few weeks. 2 lots of footage have gone into the public domain. The second lot was obtained by Mail Online, and that shows the first punch knocked the man to the ground, and the footage that Sky was playing all night last night showed 5 subsequent punches while he was on the ground. Now, a spokesman for Cheshire Police has said a 55-year-old man has been voluntarily interviewed under caution in relation to this incident. He's since been released pending further inquiries. Labour say that Mike Amesbury has been assisting Cheshire Police and he's been administratively suspended, and that means he won't have the whip at the moment, and Reform are calling for a by-election. So this one has quite a lot, I think, to run, and the images running all over the internet are pretty painful to watch.
I think that pretty much takes us to time. Sorry to the Conservatives. It's the final week of their leadership contest, but we have run out of time to say. Everyone agrees it's very close, though. And there is the alarm. So we will see you tomorrow at the same time after 7:30 in your feeds. Politics with Jack and Sam's Daily.
Can we have a different alarm noise every day, please, Sam? This one's
Certainly
much
can.
nicer than last week's buzzer. All right, thank you. Right, nice to see you all. See you again tomorrow.
See you then.
Cheers.
Bye.